we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time watching, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you ever wanted to reach out to the podcast and let us know if you wanted to hear about a topic or come on as a guest, anything like that, please reach out. Don't be afraid. Hit us up on our DMs on the Bigmark or on Twitter or Instagram at the Bigmark podcast or at the Bigmark pod, respectively. And you know, keep watching, keep supporting, share with your friends. This is always, like I always say, this is the best way to support us is by doing what you're doing right now and watching and listening. And like I said, if you wanted to hit us up with a little rating or anything, that helps us even more. But like and subscribe to really help us drive things. And if you really want to help even more, check out our patreon.com/thebigmarkpod and check out our Patreon there. There's different tiers that you can help support that way too. So again, thank you all for helping out, and thank you all for listening tonight, tomorrow, today, whenever you might be listening. You know, I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a, you know, not hella specific, but not only about, you know, the set events, because it's been fun this year, having Christmas and New Year's basically fall, well, on the Bigmark podcast, basically. Well, it's New Year's Eve when I'm recording this right now, but it's going to be New Year's Day when this comes out. So for everyone watching and everyone who was at the last podcast, this is our second kind of, you know, holiday episode, but that's not really a holiday episode. I mean, you know, I'm sure everyone's talking about resolutions and doing all the things, what they want to do and all their plans. I'm not going to hit you with all my plans today in this episode. It's more about the actual act of journaling. So anyone, you know, from the title of the podcast and just wanted to check us out, you know, we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about writing your thoughts down in a book, in a diary, on a piece of paper, on your phone, voice notes, however you do it. We're going to kind of, you know, be talking about that. And, you know, it's funny with this topic in the sense that, you know, when I was first kind of thinking about it, you know, it was something where I was kind of just looking up, like window shopping, Amazon, just checking things out. And I saw these journals and I was thinking to myself, you know, this year I do want to do a little bit more self-reflection and make some more specific time for that to actually set that aside. And like I said, you know, do some internal thought and planning and goal setting and things like that. And what better way to do that is by journaling. And, you know, so when I was perusing, I saw like a journal that was like, 2025, like daily intention planning journal, that everything, every day set out. There's different tasks you can do every day and gratitude, things like that. And I actually really sparked my interest. I would love to check that out. But I know right now, the way I am anyway, I don't like too many constraints on those kind of things. I'd rather just have a book and just journal. So a little bit of backstory. I remember as a kid, I used to journal all the time. It was a big thing. I think maybe even, you know, one of my therapists, but way back then, or a doctor, whoever, just said, hey, you know, journaling is a good idea. Have your thoughts, write your thoughts down. And now I never really went back over those thoughts. I never really, at the time, felt like grand catharsis about it, but it definitely became a habit. I definitely remember doing it basically every day and at least filling a couple of these, like, you know, small little things. But from what I recall, they were like straight up, at least this one notebook I can recall, it had like black paper in it. So I could, excuse me, I could only write in it with like a metallic fucking silver pen, which was sick. But it was straight up like blank sheets. So like I would just write the date at the top and write down my ideas. So, and like I said, I'm pretty sure I got pretty far, and then, you know, just got back to school and got busy, and then, you know, it's so funny how, you know, you form different habits from being at home as a kid, and then, you know, being a young adult, and then as you grow and certain habits kind of slough off, or you know, you put certain habits aside, or you just kind of forget, or again, I, at least personally, didn't necessarily see the benefits of journaling, but maybe there were some more benefits, and at least allowed me to kind of like maybe get some of those thoughts out onto paper. And that's the thing, right? There's like all kinds of different ways of journaling. There are those more guided ones where it's very rigid and each day you fill it out in a certain way, and I think that helps. But there's something about it for me anyway that's just like, I don't know, maybe it harkens back to a job I had where my bosses were kind of like, hey, here's a journal and every day you have to fill it out. And it was like, what, 5 things you're grateful, or like 10 things you're grateful. It was like all these things. And I was just like, I always had difficulty listing all these things, because I feel like I could just list so many things and becomes this like stalemate in my mind where I'm just like, I don't even know exactly what to put down. It's like, of course I'm grateful for these things, but then, you know, looking back on it, maybe you just put down whatever those things are, and that's totally fine. But again, I just felt like it was just kind of more like in a box, and that's the thing, right? Like, it can just be like this thing where you're just like literally writing down thoughts. You can kind of look at it like, hey, you know, this is kind of like, bringing your ideas into the real world, in a sense where it's kind of like, oh, you know, maybe you can actually reflect back on those. Like I said, I've never actually gone back on my journals and like read them, because I don't know, maybe I felt like I felt like there was just like this weird kind of vibration, an ego trip about it. I felt like this weird thing about like, it's just like this kind of thing where you feel selfish. I don't know. It's like an ego thing. Like I said, to go back on it. Maybe that's good though. Like, maybe there's nothing wrong with that in the sense of you can go over these things and maybe see some of that self-reflection, and maybe feel that certain moment at least, or pause. It's like, I don't know, I don't want to go as far as saying it's like an out-of-body experience or anything like that, where all of a sudden you're just like, oh my gosh, like I'm looking at myself in this whole other perspective or whatever, because I mean, it's still your thoughts, right? Like, you know, hopefully. But that's the thing. There's different types and different ways you can journal, right? It can be a little bit more structured. It can be those guided things. You can put your own structure on things. It can be a Dear Diary thing. Like, I'm pretty sure if I'm looking back on it, that's kind of how I approached it, as though I was talking to the journal, and the journal was like a thing, and I was just like kind of telling it what happened as if it was not there. And then again, you can, like I said, just straight out write down your thoughts. You can write down like literally exactly like what happened in your day, where it's just like, you know, woke up at this time, ate this food, ate this, right? Like, you know, I mean, when I was working in the fitness industry, there was all kinds of daily journals and goals and tasks, you know, that we recommended to people. And that was always being recommended by other practitioners about, like, you know, creating habits is a way to kind of, you know, have chart your progress, right? Because if you're kind of not really, you know, if you're taking one step forward and 2 steps back, or taking a step in every different direction, you might not necessarily be getting towards your goal as much as you think, right? So, again, maybe that's something that could be part of a practice, if you will, of a journaling practice, is again, going over those things again, and going back over what was already written, to kind of look at those things, right? So my approach this year anyway, I got lined notes, you know, totally open. I'm going to hit it with a date at the top. And again, I'm basically just it's going to be kind of a hybrid approach, to be truthfully honest, you know, just kind of whatever I'm kind of feeling that day. It might just even be like, hey, like the way I look at it, I'm just going to kind of be like, hey, like I'm just writing in the journal because I want to be consistent, because I don't know why. Maybe I'm just so used to like all those years of playing basketball and stuff, and like being away on weekends, and or like going between houses and stuff, not really having like a super set schedule and a super like consistent thing. It's hard for me to like kind of maybe look at this and say like, all right, I want to do this literally every day. But in the light of, again, you know, this being 2025 and not, you know, as much as I said, I don't want to talk about my own resolutions and things like that. But again, because this is our New Year's Eve-ish episode, and just thinking about starting fresh, right? Because that's the biggest thing about the new year, right? You know, you think about starting fresh, and you know, it's this another trip around the sun. I mean, that's obviously how our calendar works, our 365 day calendar, from the day we picked January 1st to be. You know, there's a lot of other celestial beginnings and endings, summer and winter solstice and stuff, which happened at Christmas. And then right now is just like the end of the calendar year. There's not so much that happens like right at that moment. As far as I know, I don't know too much about astrology and mysticism and things like that. But again, it's just this big thing as humans that most of us work off this calendar. We see this as a new year, a new way to be completely fresh, start on January 1st and say, hey, like what could happen if I actually stay consistent and stay with this idea and stay with these plans and goals and all this stuff, right? You know, a goal with the band and work and life and all these things, right? You know, there's all these times where we don't necessarily always take, or I don't personally take enough time to reflect on some of those things, at least as much as I would like to. Maybe not necessarily as much as I should. It's not like I don't, but you know, I would like to more. So journaling is going to be something that I'm really looking forward to. You know, it's kind of one of those things where, you know, again, hopefully help me kind of stay with the goals. It's another thing, you know, I've talked about this with the podcast, right? You know, it helps me, you guys help me stay on my goals and stuff like that, right? But only if I stay true to you guys too, right? So hopefully, again, this journal idea, even if it's just like, you know, taking that time to reflect on it, not sit there and lament over all the things I've written, because who knows, maybe again, it'll be one day it'll be plain thoughts, one day it'll be like, hey, I'm just writing here, so I'm writing. Who knows, maybe I'll even end up writing a song in there somewhere. You never know. But it's kind of one of these other things, because I just saw this documentary called Daniel. Really interesting documentary. It's an HBO documentary. I don't even know if I'll do a whole episode on it, because it's really heavy, but excuse me, it's not necessarily, you know, I'll talk about it ad nauseum, but or I'll tell people to watch it. I mean, but I don't know how much I can talk about it, because it's actually really cool. The more I think about it, I might watch it again. I don't know. It's very heavy. But it's got a really interesting twist in it. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe I'll talk about it, but maybe I won't. But bottom line is this really interesting documentary, because it was a documentary done by a person who unfortunately passed away while the documentary was happening, and he asked his sister to finish the movie. But he basically took like hours and hours, like 1,400 hours of footage through his whole life, actually, something like that, of just himself and his family, and he just kind of like set up a camera and just like let it run. So he had this kind of grand plan of making this whole movie about himself, and ended up getting sick, unfortunately, and passing away. So, but even before he was ill, you know, he had this, they talk about this in the documentary, is that he had this great feel for legacy. He had this great understanding of legacy. And it's kind of one of those things where, you know, I guess probably just as a person And, you know, as a human being, just growing older and thinking about that and things like that, you know, you kind of think about your legacy, and you think about, you know, what you might leave behind, what others might think of you. Cause, you know, if you don't, it's I don't know if this is, I forget who said this, but, you know, it's not like what you do for yourself that others remember, is what you do for others. I'm butchering the quote, but, you know, again, I want to know, you'll never know, I guess, but I want to feel in a way that I'm leaving something behind that's lasting. It's not necessarily just for myself to say like, oh, you know, Mark Krasinski was a cool guy, or like whatever. It's more so like, hey, like, I made a difference in someone's life that is lasting. Yes, maybe that difference is attributed to me, but it's not about me. It's about that difference, right? It's about actually leaving a mark in that sense, leaving a Mark Krasinski. No, like, but leaving something behind that means something, in a funny, silly way. The journals might be something like that. That is something like that, right? You know, your family, if your family ever finds something or finds journals, or, you know, I never found anything on my family side of writings as much. But it would be interesting. It would be interesting to see or have an insight into someone's mind, right? And maybe that is the intention I should have a little bit more with my own journals, is that, hey, what if, you know, years from now someone finds this, you know, what do they, but again, I don't want that to be coming from a weird egotistical place. But it's just one of those things that, you know, you kind of think about that, and it kind of pops up with legacy, kind of pops up with those things where at least it's kind of like, hey, you know, you're bringing some of your inside thoughts into the world, and if someone is ever to read these, or if you ever let anyone read them, they might have a little bit more insight into, you know, what's going on behind the scenes. Because that's the thing, right? Like, I think we all want to be understood. We all want to be heard. We all want to feel like what we're saying means something. We all want to, you know, feel like we're making a lasting impression, at least in the sense that we're not easily forgotten or we're insignificant, even though maybe that might be the case. But I feel like just as insignificant as we are in the cosmos and universe as a whole, we are just as significant because we are part of this whole thing, right? So it's all about expression, man. It's all about bringing reality. It's all about bringing, you know, thoughts and ideas into reality, it seems, anyway. We seem to be these idea machines, or at least these channels for whatever these things are. So if we feel the need to write them down, that's got to mean something, right? Who knows? Wish me luck, though, on my journey. My journal-y. Sorry, that one was bad. But thank y'all for listening. I really appreciate that. If you're a journaler, if you have a diary, if you have some type of system that you like to do, tell us. Hit us up in the comments. Reach out to us. Reach out to me in the DMs if you like. Love to talk to you and talk about more journal action. Anyway, thanks y'all for listening. I really appreciate it. Hit us up, DMs at Twitter at the Bigmark Podcast, and Instagram at the Bigmark Pod. Love y'all. Patreon, YouTubes. Don't read my diary. Love y'all. Peace.